Let's talk frankly about status reports. Yeah, I know you hate doing them, but as a high-income professional or someone who wants to have upward career mobility, pay close attention. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. Writing of status reports, it's a pain. It's a pain. But if you have a proper method in place, it can actually be a way to evidence your value to an organization while being clear about the outcomes and objectives you're able to achieve. Writing status reports effectively and clearly helps you get in front of senior level executives in ways that you may not expect. Now, to be truthful, many managers, bad managers, want things like weekly status reports. They want status reports that are activity-based rather than outcome-oriented. They make many of the mistakes that are common to status reports, which makes them so miserable. Now, I'm not going to go over the exact method because I've written a special report on that called How Top Professionals Are Boosting Their Income with an Unusual Approach to Status Reports. But what I want to do, I want to share is with some time effectiveness that I hope will change your attitude about status reporting. So first thing to understand is if someone's asking for a status report, it's necessary for whatever that they're doing. So you want to understand what is the deliverable that they're looking for so that they can solve the problem. So in a regulatory reporting environment, the status report might be on a consent order. It might be on a matter requiring attention. It may contain sensitive information, or it may need to be sanitized for a executive audience. So you need to clearly know who is your audience. And then once you know who your audience is, you're writing in plain language that not only your audience can read, but their audience can read. So if you have a board of directors that's asking for status on a project associated with a remediation, so like a regulatory remediation, you want it to be in language that your board of directors understands, but good, clean evidence for your auditors. Now, already half the people on the call are understanding that this is not the usual task-oriented status report that your manager has you do when you're not trusted, or they don't know what the hell's going on, or they're just getting familiar with the activities in the business. This is understanding that your status on where a project is as a high-income professional, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's delivering a solution. That status is, where do you stand? What's the next step? Are we on track? If we're not on track, what are we doing about it? Now, very easily, this could be a 30-minute conversation, and you've been interrupted multiple times a day with someone saying, hey, what's going on with the X project? What's going on with the Y project? Well, a status report can provide a structured way to convey the right facts about the activity at hand. Now, you may have a manager or a supervisor or an executive that you work for who does not ask for status reports. Should you give them a status report anyway? Well, I like to have an end of week wrap up, or I like to have some kind of periodic, every other week status on a project based level. So for example, I'm working with a client. I'm on probably 6 different projects. I like to have my status on hand for each of the 6 projects by the end of the week, whether or not anybody ever asks for it. Now, some managers do, some managers don't, but I like to know that if someone called me, if I'm walking down the hallway and the president of the company, the CEO, the biggest dog in the pack says, Justin, what's going on with such and such, that I would have a coherent response that would be useful to them and would add value to their day. See, you didn't think about it that way. That status report written the right way is representational of your effort. It represents your work. It represents where you are progressing towards a goal that is important to someone who likely can sign your paycheck. This is very important. This is very, very important because if you're bitching and moaning about writing a status report and everybody's debating the format of the status report and what should go in the report and how we should write the report, they're missing the point. The only purpose of a status report, and this could be an executive summary, it could be a project briefing. There's a lot of names for it, but I'm going to call it a status report to keep it simple. The only purpose of a status report is to convey clearly in an easy to digest form the information required to make decisions about milestones, deliverables, and project outcomes. Now, you may not package your work up in a project. We talk about this in another program about the work that comes across your plate to package it like a project. Find out what the deliverables are. What's the timeline? What are our objectives? Do a little bit of resource planning to package that work up into a project. Because as a high-income professional, you're likely seep deep in subject matter expertise. You're likely doing something that has a high impact. Why not treat it seriously like a project? Now, the other side of that is if your supervisors are giving you tasks, if the leadership teams are tasking you with specific things to do, and it takes like a day, there's no need to put up a project, but I would be questioning your position because as a high-income professional, you're not going up the food chain if you're doing piecemeal work. I know that's insulting at times, but if you think about it, if the manager wants to, go look up these documents, Leroy, go look them up. Well, Leroy is just getting sent to fetch. And if he wants to get to the next level, he either needs to have someone on a team that goes and does the research. It needs a system in place where the end user could pull that information up on their own. There's a lot of things that can be done, but a task-oriented status report is going to tell you that you're in the wrong position because six-figure people don't do tasks. They solve problems. Problems get packaged into projects, or they get a root cause analysis and they get an issue tied to them. But there's something more at stake to justify your revenues. And if you're doing task-based activities, then we can train somebody else to follow a list of steps. But it's hard to teach people how to solve real problems. So again, your status report becomes a means of reviewing the work that you've done over the last couple of months and then building out case studies, for example, because my report promises that we're going to increase your income with an unusual approach to status reports. And I know people are saying, why would somebody write a report about status reports? Well, if you're in the top 10%, the top 5%, the top 1% of salaries in the country, then you're doing things that are different than the 90% of everybody else. And a status report is something different for you than it would be for anybody else. If you're a lawyer, a CPA, if you're an engineer and you're working independent as an entrepreneur and you've got an agency, these status reports can backstop your billing. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when I was a computer consultant, I would very often have 5 to 10 people working on a project. And I would have them provide outcome-oriented status reports against the milestones of the project so we kind of knew where we were. But also they would flag these statuses of billable work versus non-billable work so that I could calculate what is my billing rate, that I could see that my people were actually doing the work, and that I could then summarize the activities to provide the bill. Now, I didn't do all this myself. I had staff doing it, but here's a problem, though. I didn't know to do this until I had 2 employees independently embezzle, each of them about $50,000 to $60,000 each. Now, why did that happen? Well, because I didn't know what work they were doing against the targets of a project, and I would see the projects getting behind, and it was more reactive rather than responsive. It wasn't focused on getting the outcome my client desired. I would ended up billing clients for work that my employees were just dicking around. I don't know what the hell they were doing, but it ended up being a huge problem because I didn't have the evidence in some kind of formal or informal reporting system to tag off the milestones as they went along. Now, I caught this with quality assurance because what we would do is after a milestone was reached, I would then go in and audit the milestone, and I realized that the work wasn't getting done, and I was able to address these employees directly. But later, after having a scheme for collecting status and actually having a scheme for rolling that status up into milestone reports, I was then able to expand to 27 subcontractors all over the Mid-Atlantic United States region, some of them having 10 to 100 people on their teams, and we were just grinding out work. Now, if you think about it, you may have 5 to 7 people on your team, but what if you were the project manager, or you were the program manager, or you were the lead on a multi-million-dollar effort, and you needed to report to the customer because that $160,000 invoice has come up for question? So would you have the materials in advance? Would you be able to evidence the value and quality of your work in advance of a client's question? Now, I know people get frustrated. We could talk about this some other time. They get frustrated because status reporting is an overhead activity if done the wrong way. If you use the method that I teach, you'll be able to create your status report as a transactional activity, and you'll be able to evidence the work was done well and the way it was intended. You'll be able to have an understanding of where you need to follow up. You'll have an understanding of where you stand. And literally, the big boss can shake you out of bed in the middle of the night and say, what's the status of X project? And you will have an excerpt that you can provide to them that is meaningful, evidential, meaning you can prove that that's the status, and ultimately reflects well on the efforts that are being made. Now, here's a big mistake that people make with status reports. They make these positive status reports and they make everything, they spin the story so that it sounds just beautiful, the work they're doing, and then they get bit in the ass when it comes time for the project to be due and they got to ask for an extension, or they're going to ask for a redefinition of the scope. They're going to ask for a change request to change it. All that stuff's bad. If you were doing your status in the first place, somebody's going to get a heads up. You're going to be able to know the project needs adjustments earlier. You're going to be able to add additional resources sooner, and you're going to get to your results faster. Now, I could go on for 2 days about this. It's really important that you understand. Again, if you're a salary man, that's fine. Status reports demonstrate what you're doing. Status reports position you to be able to have accurate and consistent answers in a format that executives can understand. If you're a lawyer or some kind of professional who's billing, it evidences your billing. If you're in a highly regulated market, the proper statuses, which could be the meeting minutes from a meeting where you discuss status, that proper status can be evidence that you're working in an appropriate manner towards goals and objectives set aside by a regulatory agency. It could be a very complex topic, but what I believe I've done is simplified it. I've worked with lawyers in the past and done projects where they showed me their 15-minute incremental work logs. I've worked with engineers that have engineering notebooks. I've worked with regulatory environments and Fortune 100 companies. I've worked with military contractors who need to report to different levels of leadership with status reports that sometimes are briefing style. All of these things are deliverables in the project, so you can bill for them, and you should account for them in the work itself. Now, once you have the right attitude about status reports and you understand this unusual approach, you can teach it to people on your team and become more highly effective as a team. I get real tired of people winging it when it comes to status reports. They're often, the reason they wing it is because they see it as a task-based opportunity, and they know that, the secretarial staff and the IT repairman and the order or ticket system is something they want to get away from, but they don't understand the value of this when you're in a higher stakes environment. Anyway, if you've got questions about writing status reports, writing effective status reports, or even receiving them from your team so that you can make better decisions and get greater results in the projects that you work with, then visit me at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, and we're here about helping high-income professionals and entrepreneurs corner the market with not only influence and trust building, but clear communications that help them transform business relationships into profits guaranteed. Thanks for listening.